Now that you've worked with the color washes and the lines with gouache, I'm going to show you 3 more techniques. We're going to first start with a grid, and you just map that out taking your pencil and a ruler. And I have this handy little mat that shows me 1-inch increments. So once you have that laid out, you can choose the colors that you want to work with. In this case, I'm going with fall colors. I thought this would be pretty with the poem that talks about the fire roaring in fall that I've been working with. And taking orange and red and brown and yellow. And mapping out the squares on the grid, so kind of alternating at, I don't know, it's not exactly a random pattern, but it's definitely not a regular pattern. I'm being very flexible here. Really, my goal is just to create a lot of visual interest, but also to cover the entire page. So once you fill in all the squares, you can then set it aside to dry. This next technique is a dry technique using expressive strokes. So just taking the word sunshine and loading up our palette with colors that reflect the sunshine. So we have orange and yellow. And I will take my round brush, the larger of the two, and just start making like rays of the sun going all around the word bubble. And first start with a base of yellow and come in on top with the orange and just sort of blend it in, not being too fussy or particular, but letting the paint just be very expressive so you can see your brush marks. And the third technique is a very wet technique. It's a little bit more extreme color wash, and we're going to start with the moon. So thinking about the colors that I associate with the moon, which will be like cooler colors, so black and or gray and purple and blue, but also a little bit of yellow so you can get that light color. So the first thing I do on the wet technique is to take my paintbrush, my wet paintbrush, and just moisten the entire surface. And then I come in with a very diluted paint and push the paint around on the surface. And I cover almost all with the black. Leave a few white areas for the purple to come in. And really, I'm just filling in the purple around the edges, and I decided to incorporate some yellow paint around the moon just to give it, that moon glow, that when you look at the moon, you can see a light emanating from it. And to me, this wash really looks like the surface of the moon. And so once you're done, the hardest part is waiting for everything to dry. And now we'll take a look at the final results. So here you see what I think is a very pretty pattern. Some expressive rays of sun and, the mysterious surface of the moon. So here you have 3 very different techniques to try now that you are pros with gouache. And here are some examples of the way that I have used these techniques to incorporate into my own artwork and actual pieces that I made featuring Robert's poetry. The first one is the Citrus Grove, and you could see just very simple expressive brushstrokes going in a circular motion around the word bubbles using oranges and yellows. And, was kind of thinking about like oranges and tangerines and citrus fruit. Looking at this piece called Dust, I used the color wash technique, and I believe it's been a while since I made this, but I think I first put down all of the color that I wanted, and it was really just a very random pattern. I think I actually was looking at a picture of dust floating in the light. You know how sometimes when a ray of sunshine comes through a window and you see dust particles floating in the air? That was sort of what I was going for. And so I just, again, I started with the color. I diluted the paint so that it was very thin and translucent. And I just placed it randomly around the boundary of the word bubble. And then I went and filled in the white area with the gray wash around it, trying to really preserve the color as it appeared. And this third piece here called Migration, I was looking at a painting by Jacob Lawrence, who is a very well-known outsider artist, and again, looking at these bird shapes, because birds migrate every year. And while this is about human migration, I felt the migration of birds was a fitting visual metaphor for the words on the page. And finally, here in Knapsack, looking at the language and talking about states and thinking a little bit about the political context that we have here in the US with the red and the blue states. I just took red and blue and painted each half of the page with these colors and let them sort of bleed together. Going back to that grid pattern, this is how I would incorporate that into a poem. And while this is a different series, it is one of my very favorite pieces and is actually hanging in my home. But I love the structure of a grid, and I love how the word bubbles really interrupt that. So that would be, I think, a really nice way to incorporate the grid into your artwork.